Do the graphic.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of How We Fix Britain. And I'm very, very pleased to have with us tonight our special guest, Femi Oluwole, from Our
Hey, Graham.
Future, Our Choice, and latterly of F Politics, which is a
hmm
channel that I seriously recommend. It's very good. But today we're not going to just be telling people F the Tories. We're going to be talking about electoral systems. And I know you're quite into this. This is your bag now. That sort of
Yeah, it's the main thing. It's the thing that if we don't solve, we can't fix Britain. So very, very essential.
fair enough. But I mean, has this taken precedent now over Brexit in your campaigning? Do you think? Do you think you
Well,
can't
it's
get Brexit got rid of? You can't get it undone without
yeah. So
PR.
so so, so the first priority is the electoral system because we can't deal with the issue of Brexit under first past the post. The
Yeah.
2019 election proved that we tried to answer the question of what relationship do we want to have with Europe under first past the post, and the majority voted for second referendum parties, and Boris Johnson still got a whopping majority. So that has
Mm.
proved that question to us definitively. We can potentially rejoin the single market under first past the post if Starmer is persuadable and forcible, but the whole thing needs to involve electoral reform.
I think there's going to have to be a conversation within the first 2 years of a Labour
hmm
government of like the single market. I mean, there is no other way of growing the economy, especially if they're saying they're going to get rid of immigration. Like, immigration's the only thing that's keeping our economy alive, for God's sake.
Yeah,
It's like,
I,
let's
I,
turn
I,
off the life support machine. But yeah, I
I, I,
understand why they're saying it because they want to get elected. But yeah,
I even joked the other day that the far right conspiracy theory called the Great Replacement theory, where they
yes,
basically say that the left is trying to replace white people with immigrants from abroad of different
yeah,
colors. Um,
yeah,
well, the irony is that the right keeps pushing for policies like Brexit, which make it so that people in the UK can't afford to have kids, and so we end up needing more immigration in order to have a
yes,
functioning economy. So they
yeah.
are their own conspiracy theory. They are the thing that they're afraid of. Um,
I'm just going to say a big shout out to everyone in the chat. We've got Sarah White in there. We've got Alex French. We've got Duke Vengeance, Puninator. We've got Ivan in there. Hi, Ivan. How you doing? We've got Alex Attila D6. We've got, probably pronouncing that wrong, I always do. Ned Givens in there. We've got Simon and Bob and Daylight Dave. We've got Veg Pie. Hey, Veg Pie. How you doing? And we've got Kerry Fry waving. Hello, Kerry. Now, a big part of this show. Oh, we've also got Great British Video Gamer and One Angry Pagan. Hello, I'm Colin Thompson. And Roger Haslock, who's making a good point here. Remember, it's not only the physical damage, you have to repair Britain's soul. We'll talk
mhm.
about that on the episode where we deal with press reform, because I feel that is connected. And we're going to have a separate episode as well in the future on social media. But getting back to the question this evening about what we can do to change our electoral system to make it fairer, to make it more inclusive, because at the moment, the Tories are doing literally everything in their power to make it less inclusive. So if we could bring in the people who are watching this, if you want to enter the chat, you've got to be a subscriber for a few minutes. So subscribe to the channel and you can put your ideas across. And I've got my pen and I'm going to write things down as they come. So first of all, Femi, what model of PR, proportional representation, would you like to see in the UK? Or have you got options?
So let me just put a pin in that for a second and talk about this soul thing, because that does heavily come into the electoral reform issue. Because part of what's made damage the Britain's soul is the voting system, in the sense that our first past the post voting system has made everything so binary. You're either in one camp or the other, which makes us all hate each other. And it stems from the system, because if you're in a constituency in your town and only one party can win, that means that anybody with an even slightly different point of view to yours is an existential threat to your viewpoint. It means
Yeah.
you can't work together. And so that's what's made us such an angry country. As for what system I would prefer to have, when it comes to PR, I think there should be some degree of localness to it. So I like the idea of just basically grouping maybe 10 constituencies together, and just having it done regionally.
Yeah.
So like Birmingham would have 10 MPs, Worcester would have 7 MPs, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you split it up proportionally based on the percentage of the votes that each party gets. that sort of thing would allow you to keep that local connection of these are the representatives of this area without, whilst avoiding the problem of only one MP gets elected, so the majority of votes are simply thrown away.
But wouldn't that mean that say there's there's 5 constituencies in a city, and effectively 4 of them are Labour and 1 of them, under your system, are Tory? Well, whichever constituency in that area, in that city, they might end up with a Tory MP, even though the majority in that particular constituency didn't vote for the Tories. They just had the highest proportion of vote for the Tories in that constituency. So
No,
32% voted for Tory in that constituency.
No, what I'm suggesting is that you, for example, say Birmingham has 10 MPs. So in Birmingham, everybody in Birmingham all votes together as a collective.
Oh, okay.
And then you get if 50%, if 30% vote Labour, you get three Labour MPs. 40% vote Tory, 4 Tory MPs, etc. So you have the local connection of Birmingham, but you also get the benefits of proportional representation. Okay.
And then you've got an option of which MP you want to go to if you have an issue.
Exactly. And there will at least be, this is the MP of this part of the world, this part of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, etc.
Yeah, but then wouldn't you have people having to write 10 emails to different MPs asking the same thing and seeing which one gets back to them?
Well, some people might do that, but I'm guessing if you have 3 Tory MPs, 3 Labour MPs, 3 Green MPs, 1 Lib Dem MP, whatever, you're probably going to write to the MP that most aligns with your values and is more likely to push for the specific thing that you want to get done. If you want to write to all of them, you're welcome to, but just like anybody can write to anybody right now.
Is this similar to the Hunt system that we used to have for the European?
Not too dissimilar, because that is the principle of it, of you maintain the principle of everybody's vote should get the votes and the seats in Parliament should more or less reflect the percentage of the votes each party gets, whilst also maintaining a degree of localness to it.
Yeah. Puninator, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. That's really kind. I put my ideal version of PR in the Discord. Okay, well, we're going to Discord after this, so if everyone wants to join me and anyone who wants to be part of that, if you are a patron of this channel or are a member of this channel on YouTube, you should have access to the Discord server, and we'll be there at 9 o'clock. So One Angry Pagan saying we really ought to have a pretty solid plan to put to the people. I agree. Chatty Rat saying electoral reform. What should the UK go for? Party list, regional, national, open or closed list, what minimum threshold, Dehont, single member, first past the post with regional top up, multi-seat STV. And this is the crux of it, isn't it? There are lots of different styles of PR or styles of democracy. Just what would fit the British psyche the best and keep that sort of, I guess, that line of history of you were talking about having that connection with the constituency that we've had.
I think while there are many, I think there's a broad, like, Make Votes Matter as an organization which pushes for electoral reform and proportional representation. Their principle is that anything that's proportional representation they'll support, because I think the issue is you just have to get to having votes matching seats in Parliament. That's the building blocks. What you do with democracy after that, that's the stuff that's going to really matter. So, for example, we need to have a better system of accountability so that, I mean, you've got sites like They Work For You, so you can see everybody's voting record and how they voted on various issues. But I think, especially when we get to PR, people are going to want to see, okay, what is the voting record of this party that I'm voting for? How have they acted on these things? I think that the data, the information, the tools that are available to voters will be just as important as changing the voting system itself.
Yeah. I mean, the one of the things about having that idea where you have the Hunt style system, where does that leave independence?
I do take that as a point, but I mean, to be fair, they'll have a better shot under the Hunt style system than they would under this current system, given the way things are. So it's still a step in the right direction. Because if there are 10 MP slots in Birmingham, and before the threshold, if you wanted to have a serious shot of being in any way represented, you needed to get at least 35-40% of the vote.
Yeah.
Under that system, significantly less. So you've got a better shot as an independent under that system.
Yeah. I've just had a massive super chat come in from Ivan. Thank you so much, Ivan.
Wow.
That is incredible. Thank you so much. Wow. Electoral. I was a bit overwhelmed again. Thank you, Ivan. You're an absolute legend. Electoral reform is absolutely essential. First past the post has certainly had its day. It's imperative that the concept of electoral reform and the different voting systems are explained in an understandable way. Not everyone is engaged in politics. I couldn't agree more. You know, during the 2011 referendum, Femi, on the single transferable vote, so it wasn't really PR. It's kind of,
Nope.
It just meant it was the same deal that we have for mayoral elections around the country until the latest ones where the Tories changed it. But you put 1, 2, 3 for your first candidate, your second, which would be count bin face, and then you put Sadiq Khan for number 2. Right, Kim bin face doesn't get enough number 1s, taken out the running. And effectively, that's what you have in these presidential runoffs where you have loads of people running for president, and then in the second round, it's just a head-to-head. Of that, you avoid having all that extra time and expense of having the head-to-head if you just have an STV system where it's like number 1, this person, number 2, that person. And I was in Australia at the time, and I remember watching a news report on Channel 7 in Australia, and the Aussies were so snide. They were just laughing that it didn't go through, that it was rejected by the voters. And they said, this voting system that we've had in Australia for over 100 years seems like it was just a bit too complicated for the Poms. And I was like, F you, lady! But yeah, because it just wasn't explained very well. And as Ivan says, a lot of people aren't engaged in politics. They don't really care about the nuts and bolts of it. They might drive a car, but they don't know how it works. I don't know how my phone works.
And that's why I do lean towards the idea that having alternative votes mixed in with PR, the STV sort of thing, I think just putting one choice would make things simpler. Like, we're going to make it so that you can choose whichever party you want, and the seats in Parliament will match the percentage of votes that each party gets. Like, keeping it that simple, I think that would help.
Yeah. Johan is saying, try to avoid ending up in a situation like in Belgium. Right now, we have 8 parties form the government and they barely have a majority of seats. That's something I agree with, that is an issue. And if you think about, okay, so you have a party that gets 45% of the vote. They have to team up with a party that got 6% of the vote. And that party is probably not going to be a centralist party. They're probably going to be a wingnut party. And we see it, and they will pull the big party to the right or the left, but more usually the right. And because in this country, say the Tories and Reform went into a coalition under a PR system, they might have enough votes to do that.
Well, I mean, they might have enough votes to do it under a PR system, but statistically, they won't do that, because in every election since World War II, they've only the parties are either Tory or to the right of Tory have only had the majority of the votes in 3 elections. So we are generally speaking, if we continue voting more or less the way we have done for the last 80 years, you're going to see progressive coalitions in there. It's not going to be Tory and Reform on the whole. Yes, there may be times. And it is something that we're scared of now, that if Keir Starmer doesn't actually deliver real change, then it will push people to seek alternatives, such as Reform. So that is a risk. But in general, as far as who we are as a country, we're a left of center-ish voting country.
That's surprising. I know that, I find that surprising, though, because we have returned so many Tory governments. 66 of the last 100 years have been under Tories.
That's the voting system. I mean, because Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Greens, those 4 parties, they have had the majority of the vote in all but 3 elections since 1945. That's who we are. And yet the Tories have been in power for the majority of that time, almost 2/3. But we have, our voting system constantly skews power to the right.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a more equal voting system where people are better represented. But then we'll go back to the 6% party again, and they might be centrist, they might be right wing, left wing, doesn't matter. they have a veto over everything that the 45% party want to do. If the 6% aren't on board with it, it doesn't become a law. How do you deal with that?
Well, to a certain extent, why should it become a law? If it's something that doesn't have the support of people who represent the majority will, and the majority of MPs representing the majority of the people in a proportional system don't want it to become law, why should it become law?
So if a party is completely reliant on the DUP, say.
Again, I mean, there's a bunch of issues involved in that. There's if the majority of votes go to parties such as the Tories and the DUP, then that's who should be making our decisions.
Yeah,
that is democracy. It's unlikely to happen because we haven't ever voted that way, really. But if that was the case, we should respect democracy in that sense. There's also the fact that if you did get a situation like where two parties could go into power, if one party chooses to go into power with an extreme party that does horrendous stuff, they will know that that will hurt them come the next election. We've seen what happened with the Lib Dems. They're never doing the whole Tory thing ever again.
No.
They know it hurt them too much. They're still living with that now.
Davey would rather fall off a surfboard into Lake Windermere, which is full of poo, than join the Tories again.
Yeah, the idea
of falls on the word.
Face planting into a river that you're saying is full of crap in order to prove that the river is full of crap is a wild strategy.
Has anyone done that with a Tory MP yet, where they've given them a glass of water from Devon and said, "Drink that"? on TV, that would make great television. So a few more chats. We just had another super chat come in, and it's €10, and I love the fact that we get euros on this show. Thank you very much, David Welsh. There. Problem with 5+ multi-member constituencies in the UK is outside cities, the territories will be enormous, especially in Scotland. Less than 5, not very proportional. Least worse is the AMS German style. Do alternative member system, is it? What's AMS?
Well, I know the German system is made up of a kind of a half and half PR, half first past the post system. If I'm correct on that, I'm not sure. As for the large constituencies outside of the big cities, yes, that would be something that would happen. But you try and, I don't want to use the word gerrymander, but positively gerrymander it to just to sort of include people that if they have the same interests. So if you're talking about trying to group rural areas together, so
you've got counties. Just do it on county lines. County lines? Oh God, that's an awful thing to say. Right, we've got loads of chats to get through, and don't feel like you have to give a super chat to get mentions. I'll try and get through all of them. Ned Gibbons is saying one thing that's not mentioned is there are two chambers in Westminster, and both of them need reform. Something that I think we'll talk about in the second half of the show. Yes, definitely. The Great British Video Gamer says, is there a way for people to just vote for Labour MP and then for the Tory, then Lib Dem, and so on and so forth until you have all the parties in all the constituents? Yeah, I guess so. Richard says, a lot of reforms needed are intertwined. Any intended electoral reform has to be sold to the general public. Without press reform, this will be tricky. And this is why, Femi, I think that we need the first form of PR we need is press reform before we get proportional representation. Because you've got a press now that have put out headlines like enemies of the people about our judiciary. They've put out headlines saying saboteurs, crush the saboteurs about elected representatives. They've called our universities, our Remainer universities, castigating our one of the big actual success stories of this country in the last X many years has been our university sector. And they're like, oh, far too woke. In fact, the National Trust has gone woke. Every British institution you can think of, they've gone after. And I just can't see us getting any progress on things like what we want with proportional representation or fair voting system.
There's a chicken and egg. There's a chicken and egg issue there of how are you going to reform the press if the people who are in power don't want to reform the press? So I do think that we can all. I'm not saying we shouldn't try. We should definitely try and push Keir Starmer as hard as we can towards press reform when he gets in. But I do think that first and foremost, fixing the voting system to make it fair and representative of the people is going to create the building blocks that we need in order to reform the press and get some decent press
Okay.
regulation in there.
From the Labour MPs that I've spoken to, they all want press reform. And Starmer, when he was Director of Public Prosecution, did go after Murdoch. And, the downfall of the News of the World, brilliant. He was behind that. And Rebecca, I've forgotten her name now.
Long Bailey?
No, the curly hair woman. What's her name? She used to work for Murdoch. She was involved at the phone hacking scandal. Rebecca. Someone's going to tell me in the chat. Anyway, more comments. What have we got here? How to fix Britain? Rejoin the EU, says David. We'll get to that on another episode. Colin saying, how do you avoid the problem of small parties exercising much more influence as seen in New Zealand or Israel, which is what I was just talking about then, saying, these smaller parties, if you've only got 5% of the vote, how can you have literally a veto power? I mean, if you think about it in terms of the UN, imagine having one country being it. Rebecca Brooks, that's the one. Thank you, David. Imagine having one country that can just veto everything. Oh, hang on, we do. The Security Council.
So that veto concept, I mean, in theory, they'd be able to bring down the government if they choose to, sure. But then again, why are you going to power with somebody that toxic again? And then again, that will come back to haunt them at the next election. But also, if we're talking about the government introduces a bill, then that bill will then be voted on in Parliament, and if the majority wouldn't have to be made up of that minority party, it could be made up of MPs from any party. So as long as, and again, if a law doesn't have the support of the majority of MPs representing the majority of people, which is the whole thing we're aiming for here, then why should it be passed? Because so much of the argument against PR is along the lines of the countries with PR all have slowly small parties and then they never get anything done. But we are the outlier in Europe. We're the only other country other than Belarus that uses first past the post, and Belarus is often referred to as Europe's last dictatorship. So we're not in good company there. Other countries do manage to function. And if your argument is in favor of something similar to what we have now, where parties that have a minority of the vote can just get stuff done without having to even consult the other parties who the majority of the British public will have voted for because they only had a minority of the vote, then you're not arguing for democracy, you're arguing for dictatorship. You're arguing that a minority of people should be able to completely overrule the majority and do whatever they want with absolutely no checks and balances on them. That's the choice we're making here. There will be a degree of slowing down of the process because you're going to have to get more people to agree. But I think we should be moving to a place where, again, comes back to the whole soul of the country thing. We should be moving to a place where one of the goal to achieve, the aspects, the characteristics, the personality traits that we should be looking for in our politicians is who can work with other people. Right now, we've got a very adversarial system where everybody likes to play the strongman of, I'll destroy that party. Labour's this, Tory's this. No, we want to have people that can actually work with other people and find common ground people they disagree with.
I do actually want to destroy the Tory party. But that's I don't want to destroy the Lib Dems or the Greens or the SNP or Plaid Cymru, but Reform, I quite like to destroy them. But yeah, we'll come on to that because we need to talk about reform of the actual chamber, the way our MPs operate, their daily routine, the fact how we pass laws, and whether we want to keep our Parliament in London in that old building that's a fire hazard that one day might go up like Notre Dame. Super chat here from Johnny Copperhead. Thank you very much, Johnny. When the Tories finally realised that screaming their hate into the right-wing void is getting them nowhere and try and return to normal politics, we will have PR in place and their fangs will have been pulled. And that's obviously what we're all hoping. We've got a additional member system. Is the thing in Germany where they have a 5% cutoff. So if you don't have 5% of the vote, you don't get any MPs. Colin Thompson says, if parties like Labour perpetually have less than 50% of the vote, how would something like the NHS happen? Well, they Yeah. That Labour
Well,
would have to go in with the Greens or the Lib Dems and convince them that the NHS would be a good idea.
yeah, I mean, again, this is the thing. Like the system we have, people need to understand how rigged it is because you're always playing a game that is rigged. If you're trying to get total control and get any policy through without convincing the people, without bringing people with you, so everybody at every election, the majority of voters are screwed. We should be having a situation where we can talk to people and say, "Hey, I think this is a good idea. I think universal healthcare is a good idea," and I believe the most people do agree with that. So you would
Yeah.
have other parties supporting things like the NHS.
What about idiots?
So
Because here's the thing, Femi.
mm.
You know, in referendums,
Yep,
the side that spends the most on advertising almost always wins.
yeah, but I mean that's literally politics. We won't get it until we get some proper regulation of election spending and try and get
Yeah.
some rules on that. Money is going to carry. So along with it's all part of democratic reform. This country
Yeah.
is obviously very, very broken in a number of ways. One of the rules I think needs to be introduced is that um, if it's proven that one side, for example, overspent by £449,000, and that should nullify the end vote, which is what happened with vote leave.
Yeah.
And also, if there should be consequences for lies that are told by politicians, whereby all things considered, that politician should have known that what he was saying was a lie.
Yeah.
And if it turns out that as a consequence of the decisions that are made because of the lie that that politician told, there is significant loss to the economy or to vital health infrastructure, then that should have criminal sanctions.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of things that should be introduced into our democracy, and proportional representation is just one major first step.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll talk about this because we need to talk about the role of MPs in the future and how it all like works. Because you're absolutely right. How dare they stand up, tell lies, and get away with it? Given a golden handshake on the way out, maybe a nice knighthood or a gong, and so you can sit in the House of Lords. And that's got to change. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's get through some more chats. Gaz Oakes is saying, "I've been silenced." I'm sorry, Gaz. That's awful. Reese is saying it's never been tried using modern tech. I think talking about proportional representation, maybe. Maybe just voting in Parliament. David Welsh says everyone has a constituency, but the total this is about Germany in the Bundestag is proportional, as you have non-constituency deputies as a top up. Okay, so you have people who don't have a constituency, a bit like the leader, not the leader, the Speaker of the House. If you ever see an electoral map of the UK, there's this black bit, right? It's just filled in black between Liverpool and Manchester. That's Chorley, and that's the constituency of the Speaker of the House. And it's a weird system. So I guess they have a proxy there who deals with MPs with constituents' people in the constituency's problems.
Yeah.
Constituents' problems. Jeannie Bottle said, "I always did support Lib Dems until Clegg bending over for Dave. I switched to Green. I live in hope of something better than before." I think we all do. Svak said, "Have you seen the current constituencies in Scotland? In PR, their votes will be better represented anyway." Ed says you will also have to change your media. We'll do this on another episode because otherwise nothing will change. Coalitions in Northern Netherlands government by an agreement stroke manifesto. Danger of small parties vote vetoing is relatively small. So you have an agreement. This is the policies you want to put forward in this parliament. You make a big list of them before you start the parliament, so it's not like things get jumped on the minority party and said, "Oh well, full trump card, isn't it?" says Gaz Oakes. What? Alan Walker says, "I'd like to see Westminster only deal with issues that affect the whole union, second chamber, regional matters, and a parliament for England in the Midlands.
Yeah.
The House of
Fundam-
Britain idea.
so yeah, I think we need to deal with a lot of devolution in the UK. I think that because
Yes.
often you hear arguments along the lines of we can't have PR because then the big cities will just decide everything because there's more people there. And for starters, if we're talking about where money is spent funding infrastructure, that sort of thing, then obviously that should be done at a local level so that the decisions are made by the people who live there. But if
Yeah.
we're talking about things like what sort of country should we be, what human rights do we want to have, that should be who are we as a society. That should be decided by the whole country. And if there are more people in the cities, then yes, there are more people in the cities. That's just going to happen. Who we are as a country should be decided by the people as a whole.
Yeah. And we're doing a whole episode on devolution in the future. So yeah, we'll be talking about that definitely. Not just for the Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, but for the regions, especially up where I am here in the Northeast, that could really do with a lot of support. And the one size fits all model just doesn't work. But we'll get into that in a future episode of how we fix Britain. And we'll get back into the chat. Aaron Gray says, so now they're attacking art history. Grim Fan said, I think with how horrific the press have been this week, it'll be heavily incentivized to reform the media ASAP. I couldn't agree more. Rebecca Brooks is currently the head of Murdoch's UK businesses. She was fired for 2 minutes and then reinstated. Oh, that's terrible. And I heard that the horrible tyrant billionaire got married again for the 5th time, even though he's 94 years old. Him. Yeah. Every time someone famous dies and who are quite liked or respected, all I can think of is like, how are they dead and Murdoch is still alive?
Yeah. On the topic of the press being horrendous, I did a video on this about a week or so ago about the elephant in the room. One of them is Brexit, in terms of every bit of this election. Elephants, one of the, every election press coverage interview you see will always have some question of where will you find the money to pay for that. And because the government's own data and experts say that Brexit is costing our economy, costing the government's purses and finances £40 billion a year, that means there's £40 billion a year just sitting on the table and they're refusing to point to it when they're asked, where are you going to get the money from? The other big, massive elephant in the room is electoral reform, because it's baked into every question that they ask. Because you'll see if they're talking to the Tories line is always Labour doesn't have a plan, which is basically saying Labour shouldn't just win by default because they're not us. They should actually be able to actually stand for something. And that is a complaint about the two-party system. They're complaining that Labour is going to win by default simply because they've done horribly. They're complaining about the two-party system. Every time they talk to the SNP, Lib Dems, Greens, and they say things like, oh, but look, you obviously want the Labour government because you don't want the Tories, which means you're going to end up, if you're going to have any power, having to go into coalition with them. Why are you ruling out any sort of deal or pact or a coalition or that sort of thing? Again, they're saying you don't have a chance because you're not one of the two big parties. They're using the two-party system against them. At every stage of this, in every conversation, the electoral system is used as a weapon, and it's the thing that's sitting there in the corner, and nobody's mentioning it.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you feel about agreeing with Piers Morgan the other day on Question Time? Did you feel dirty? Did you need to have a bath afterwards?
No, not even a little bit, because
I'll never be clean again.
Because it's not he's known everything that he said on Question Time. He's known for years. He knew that Brexit wasn't democratic. He knew it would make people poor. He supported it for about 3 years because he thought that would make his Daily Mail subscribers happy. He chose to screw the entire country and push us off a cliff for his own personal gain. So what he was saying on Question Time wasn't some new revelation that he's now on our side. He's never on our side. He can be as pro-Remain or pro-rejoin the EU as he wants. He's never going to be on our side because he's only ever on his own side. He goes what he thinks will gain him the most popularity. When he thought that Remain was going to win, he supported Remain. When after the referendum, when he thought that people wanted Brexit, he supported Brexit. now that Brexit's hurting people and the polls show that everybody hates Brexit, he's against Brexit. With Boris Johnson, he was really supportive of Boris Johnson, calling him such a nice, smart guy, and that he's the one person we should all trust to get Brexit done. And then when the country turned against him during COVID, suddenly Boris Johnson's such a scoundrel. He's completely just a human weather vane, blowing whichever way his own ambition takes him.
I tell you, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we've talked about this before. When people have a go at us for political commentary on the left here, and it's like, you know, oh, you're just doing this for the clicks. And I'm like, if we wanted to make some serious coin, we would shill for the right, because I mean, they'll love you. They'll have you on GB News 24 hours a day.
If I turn to the right, as a black guy, the right would pay me millions.
Yeah, millions. You could be a millionaire within a week.
I'm currently living in my best friend's spare room. I could be living in a mansion right now.
Yeah. if you just sold out. God damn it. Maybe you should say that you sold out and then just say, oh, no, I was only joking. Don't do that says the system is working for the majority. It's safe from populist vandals. If it isn't, people voting for Johnson trust Melly in the hope of a reset. Yeah, well, that's the thing. People in Argentina voted for Milei, and he's an absolute bloody lunatic. Having a single MP is a nightmare. My MP went on maternity leave, which is fine, but she basically just put out of her office for 3 months. There's no fallback. That's a very good point, Ned. You know, my
people
MP, should have more than one. Mary Foy, she's amazing. She's wonderful. I'm going to be out canvassing with her tomorrow here in Durham. But she's suffering from cancer. She's having cancer treatment. And when she's in hospital, she's not working, you know, helping the constituents. Obviously, she has a team of people who are helping out. But yeah, it would be good to have a backup and to have another MP for your area, for your city. So Liverpool's would say have 5 MPs. And if I can't get hold of my one, I can get another one. And that would also help with MPs who aren't there. Let's talk about reform of the House of Lords then. The House of Commons, Parliament, Westminster. So first of all, someone's mentioned this in the chat. I'm sorry, I've lost it where it was, but they were just talking about how adversarial it is having those two benches facing each other with the government and the opposition, and how everyone's just, you know, all put in there together, all 650. Well, there's never 650 in the chamber, but it's a chamber designed for like 300 people. That's got 600 people in it sometimes, which is just madness. But the whole shape of it is not conducive to reasoned debate and coming up with good policy and having a debate that actually changes the minds of the people who are voting. People vote one way or another. They're told what to vote for. We have party whips. MPs don't even bother reading the bills that they vote for in the majority of times. They just, okay, I've got to go through the lobby and vote for yes. So what are the things that you would do to address those problems in the structure of our parliament?
Well, obviously, I think you need to have a lot more digital voting. I think that I think we have the ability to do it online, especially given that it would be good if MPs spent more time in their constituencies with the people that they're representing. So if they were able to do what they do from home as more of a standard thing, that would be useful. Although you could argue that the in-person thing makes it easier to meet all MPs in one place. It back and forth on that one. As for party discipline and the whipping and the concept of the whip, it's completely wrong under a first past the post system. I'd struggle to argue against there being some kind of whipping system under a proportional system, because party discipline makes more sense under proportional representation, where you're voting for a party more than an individual. Because under the first past the post system we have now, the whole point is you're voting for an individual. You are supposed to be an individual. Yeah, if you're being whipped and controlled by central office, then you're really voting for a party, even though nobody told you you're voting for a party, because the person you're voting for doesn't have autonomy. However, if you are voting for a party, you would want some sort of structure in place to make sure that you are getting what you voted for. Yeah. And so party discipline does make more sense under those circumstances.
Okay. Well, I'll put that out to the chat as well if anyone wants to give some ideas. Can you explain the party whip? Asks the Great British Video Gamer. Yeah, basically every party has a group of people whose job it is to, and they're usually MPs, who to get the people in that party to vote the way that the leadership of that party want them to vote. And they've got 3 lines that they can draw under the policy. So it'll be a 1-line whip, which is like, if you happen to be in Westminster that day, please come and vote. You've got a 2-line whip, which is a bit more serious, like, please get to Westminster and vote on this. A 3-line whip is, if you don't vote with the government or the opposition or your party, then there will be disciplinary action taken against you. And we talk about how much MPs get paid, but there's a lot of bonuses on top of that, and there's bonuses for being part of a party that can be taken away, travel allowance, things like that. Or if you have the whip taken away, then you're cast adrift and you're left to fend for yourself in the next election as an independent. And it's really, really hard to win an election if you're an independent, unless you're a celebrity or something. That's basically what. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. It basically says, I mean, the party's off basically your boss, and they're saying we might fire you if you don't vote the way we say.
Well, yeah, and then there's Phil talks about this a lot about party discipline, and he says, "Well, I don't understand why you would be part of a party that you didn't agree with. Like, why would an oil lobbyist join the Greens and then moan about the fact that they are the Greens?" You know what I mean? It should all work out in the wash, where the people who's think of themselves as what do they call them? Capitalist nightmares. They go and join the Tory party.
Well, I mean, this is the problem with the Tory parties have right now. That old rule no longer applies. If you join the Conservative Party as a small C Conservative, we are sensible with the nation's finances and low taxes, etc. That was the brand of the Conservatives up until blah blah blah, and then Brexit came along, and then it was a case where every single MP, even though all their experts said that Brexit would severely damage the economy, knowingly did something that would hurt the economy. So the concept of conservatism, small c, died. So you might have joined the party for those reasons, but those reasons are gone now, and it is just about power.
You see a lot of ex-Tories saying, "I didn't leave the party left me."
Yeah, exactly.
Sfax is saying, "You kidding me? Bojo was." This is from a while ago. Bojo was populist as well. First past the post ain't stopping populists, but giving them 100% of unchecked power. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's the thing with proportional representation. It's not perfect, and it won't. It's a bit like I talk about the voting system in Australia, where they require you to vote. If you don't vote, you're given a fine. And a lot of people go, yeah, that sounds really great, because they look at the pie chart, they go, these people voted Tory, these people voted Labour, and these people didn't vote at all. If they had voted for your preferred party, they would have won the election. You're like, that's assuming that they would have voted for your preferred party. And as we see in Australia, they don't always do that. By the way, if anyone wants to check out the new Juice Media video that they've done, their Honest Government ad about democracy, it's brilliant. And StopTheTories.vote does get a name check in it. So please check that out. It's really good. We could have a real parallel democracy, a real parallel digital democracy, says Aaron, which is interesting, that idea of people getting more and more involved. But I'll come on to this last, actually, because I do want to talk about citizen involvement in politics. Because at the moment, it's once every 5 years, you go and vote, and that's about it. You might write a letter to the Times if you get really upset about something. And I'd like to see more interaction between our...
That's what my last video was about.
And the electorate, more town hall stuff, and the ability to do that and make it accessible to all is there now in terms of technology, when it wasn't there maybe even just 10 years ago. So yeah, that's something that I'd really like to see, because I've said this a million times as well on this channel, MPs don't know jack shit about stuff unless you point it out to them. They're not omnipotent. Do you know what I mean? They're like that. Yeah. Anyway, Ned Gibbons there. In some cases, there might be an MP for a relevant specialism or select committee membership for the issue you're making contact about. Mildly displeased. Churchill had a chance to rebuild the Commons, but chose to keep the adversarial nature of the chamber. I quite like it. It's unique compared with other nations, although I wish it was a bit grander. I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of Giles Gilbert Scott, who's the guy who redesigned the chamber after the war. But yeah, it's too small, and I think that having a grand chamber's cool, but make it big enough and make it circular so that it's not everyone shouting at each other. Whoa, it's got another massive super chat. Thank you, Johnny. This is what happens when you do positive shows where it's not just complaining about stuff, it's actually putting forward. Listen, this is stuff we can do. Thank you so much. That's incredibly generous. Thanks, Johnny. I would like to put forward Lincoln as the seat of our newly minted, fully democratic parliament. It's close enough to Doncaster to keep Phil Morehouse happy, but it's beautiful and has a castle and everything. Sorry, playing fantasy politics again. Johnny, I'm going to disagree with that because I've just seen a map of the British Isles if we have tactical voting, and literally the only places left still voting Tory are like Norfolk and Lincolnshire. So yeah, it'd be like when
I
was going to say it'd be a bit like when the Tories have their conference in Manchester. It's like, why are you having your conference in this Labour city? So you go, what are you saying?
I was going to say that when I've thought of where I'd like the parliament to be, I've always thought of Newcastle, because technically it's sort of central-ish to the whole of the UK. And I've always imagined it being at the Life Centre. You know the Life Centre that's like next to the station. Yeah. That's like a really good building. If they had Parliament there, it's modern. It's not, doesn't look like it was built.
It'd be very convenient for me. It's only 15 minutes away by the train, but yeah. But this is your neck of the woods up here, isn't it?
Yeah, it was where I was born in Darlington, so yeah, just like half an hour south of there.
Yeah. It's the last stop before Durham. Get off at Darlington. Ivan Ambrose, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. The most recent MP in my constituency of Ipswich, Tory Tom Hunt, careful how you say his name, hardly ever replied to me, and when he did, it didn't address anything. It caused me panic attack after panic attack. Thank you very much for the super chat, Ivan. I'm really sorry to hear that, man. That is shite of your MP, and that's a problem. If you have a shite MP, there's no one else to go to, because if you try and write to another MP, they say, I don't represent you, you can't talk to me about this.
Here's the thing. Do you want to read the super chat first, and I'll talk about Jess Phillips in a second?
What's that? I've read it.
Oh, you read? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm one step ahead of you. I can see it before it comes on the screen.
I was going to say that on the issue of not having an MP that you can speak to and someone you can go to when you need something, when I tried to put the case for portrait representation to Jess Phillips, her response was, but I want to maintain the constituency link. But that constituency link isn't there for the majority of people, because the majority of votes don't have any effect on Parliament policy. So the majority of people don't have somebody in Parliament that can actually make a difference on their behalf. Second of all, it works for her because she won. But what about the majority of people for whom they didn't vote for their MP?
Yeah.
Like, the majority of people did not vote for their MP, so they know they're going to somebody whose values do not align with them. Whereas if you have a proportional voting system, there's always going to be somebody that you can go to who at least broadly shares your viewpoint.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well made. Johnny Cophead, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. But not in Lincoln. We're turning that red in July. Yes, hopefully. Lincoln, the actual city, not Lincolnshire. That would be amazing. Now, Countdown to Power is saying I think it should be in Liverpool. I might be a bit biased, though. I'll say why I think it should be in Liverpool. I said this before, because then people can get there from all the 4 constituent parts of the UK without flying. Because you can get there by boat from Belfast. So there you go. That's why I think it should be in Liverpool. Also, I'm from Liverpool, so I'm biased. So with the House of Lords, right? We've run out of time here, man. There's so much to talk about. House of Lords, it just needs abolishing. But do you feel like we still need an upper chamber for scrutiny of bills and all that kind of stuff? And how would you set that up?
My gut says that there needs to be some kind of second chamber because of how common a thing it is across the world. Something that as a check and balance, or at least maybe an expert chamber of just to make sure that the laws they're doing actually stand up to muster. How that would be chosen and who the experts would it be? Universities put forward their best academics across the country, blah blah blah. That could be a way of doing it. I don't know.
Who decides though? How is that? Would that be decided by the lower house together?
Well, I'm literally just spitballing here. So, but some idea of academics from the individual fields having somebody representing them saying this is what the general consensus view is on this particular topic that can then speak on behalf of that in a reviewing chamber that doesn't have
Right.
binding control, but can at least say, hey, this law that you're about to pass is going to have this effect. You might want to reconsider.
Yeah, yeah, to be able to slow down legislation because again, MPs don't read the papers. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the bills that go through, they don't read them, and there's always mistakes. There's always things that like you have legal minds looking at it, going, actually, if you do that, then this will happen. The
Mm.
law of unintended consequences. Everyone's arguing where it should be now. Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool. David Welsh says no more bishops, please. An absolute minimum. It's insane. Yeah. Do you know what the only other country to have members of the clergy in legislative roles?
Is it America or
No,
no, Italy?
no,
Italy.
no. It's Iran.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that
There you
well,
go.
Islamic Republic. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I love the way we like take our PR system. Sorry, we take our first past the post system, and there we go. Who else has got that? It's like Belarus,
Iran.
and who else has got religious people who are just given a job to rule on our laws. Iran. An elected second chamber would either be redundant or cause gridlock, depending on whether the opposition or government has more seats. I think the lords should be appointed the same way judges are. I'm minded for that as well. I mean, I don't think that directly electing the upper chamber would be very helpful. And I look at other models around the world of democracies, and you look at America, they've had gridlock for years because we've got an elected Senate and an elected House of Representatives. And if they're not all one party, if not both of them are not one party, nothing's getting through. And then if you get through to the president can veto anything that comes through to the president.
What do we think about the idea of having some kind of presidential system-ish on top of a elected House of Commons by PR?
Yeah, not a not a political role. It would have to be like the German president or the Indian president, which is the head of state, but not actually it's a ceremonial role, and they can't actually have any effect on the laws or whatever. But I would be up for that kind of system. I do think that it's important to separate off the head of state from the head of government, because otherwise you have a system like in America and all the countries that they've exported their flavour of democracy to that fall to dictatorships far too often, especially in developing countries, because the head of state is also the head of the government and usually the head of the army, head of the Air Force, head of the Coast Guard, head of the FBI. It's a bit mad. Head of the Department of Justice. And I bet Nadine is pissed that Rishi never put him into the Lords, says Sarah. Yeah, indeed. Second chamber should be federal chamber. So this is the other thing I was going to mention. This is from Will Hutton put forward this idea back in the 1990s of having a House of Britain, which is a chamber representing the devolved regions rather than having that constituency link of the MPs in the lower chamber. And again, they can't necessarily stop legislation that the government want to put through, but they can hold it up and review it.
I think at all stages, transparency is going to be the thing, because if you have the parties voting for something and then the experts say it will deliver this consequence, and the country can see that this has been the statement of the experts that this is going to have this effect, that then helps it adds another degree of accountability, ongoing accountability to the public for the decisions they make. If the public is seeing that with these people keep doing things that the experts keep saying is going to cause XY damage.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right with upping transparency in government. That can only ever be a good thing. And I think you were right earlier when you were talking about criminal sanctions for telling porcupines. And also, I think that this deserves another video, but we talk about MPs and second jobs and lobbying and all that kind of stuff. That all needs reforming, and that's separate to sort of the election setup. So yeah, maybe in a future date we'll do an episode literally on what MPs should be doing, like their job, because I think it's mad that they can have second jobs. How can Rishi Sunak make 120 million pounds last year?
Yeah, so it's the same thing that happened with Owen Patterson when he was making £112,000 a year from his consultancy and paid lobbying on behalf of Randox and Lynn, and I think another company. And if his salary as an MP, as a public servant, is 82 or so thousand pounds that it was at the time, but he's earning £112,000 from private companies, then who is his real boss? It's not the people. He is not working primarily. His interests lie balanced away from the people and towards the private sector.
Yeah. Absolutely. Someone's suggested, sorry, I missed who it was because it's gone off the top of my screen, but they're saying elections should be on Sundays as a start. Absolutely. Elections on Sundays.
So
I can't believe we don't do that.
We have to. I've been thinking about this quite recently, but it's stupid that they're on a Thursday or a Tuesday. They should not have elections where the majority of people will have work commitments. However, once you start dealing with the weekend, you get into issues like the Sabbath and what people are allowed to do because of religion and those sorts of things. And could you end up making it discriminatory? Would you therefore have to have a 2-day election period? That sort of thing. You'd have to find some way around the religious element of the Sunday and the Saturday.
I don't think there's anything in Christianity about not voting on a Sunday, is there?
Christianity, no, but there could be something within Judaism. I'm not 100% sure in terms of the
Judaism
Sabbath.
Is Friday night, Saturday day.
Okay.
So
cool.
Yeah, Sunday should be accommodate everyone. Muslims pray on Friday. I think it should be all right. Check with the Hindus. How do you feel about something? I do find it mad that we live in a country where, like, Saturday night, you're out with your mates having a drink, and then you go, I'll go to Tesco on the way home and get some munchies. And it's closed because it's now Sunday. It's after midnight. You've just been in a nightclub where they're bashing out rave tunes. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what?
No. Try living in mainland Europe. As you know, Sunday shopping as a thing. Remember the first time I moved to Brussels and I got there, I think on the Saturday, but didn't realize I needed to actually pack stuff because the shops would be closed on the Sunday. And all I had to get me through from like Saturday night through to work on Monday morning was this jar of Lotus Biscoff spread that was chunky, that was just spooning it out with my finger, and I was just surviving on that for about 48 hours.
Do you know in Germany they did a thing? Well, I don't know if they still do this, but they on a Friday, on a Sunday, you were allowed to sell things if they were gifts, if they were souvenirs. So they just go around labeling everything in the shop like gifts. Like you could get a pint of milk, be like tuna gift, tuna gift. Just wrap it up in a bow. Yeah, you can buy it now. Just bizarre. Just legislate that employers must give time off to vote. That's another thing that could be done. But then people working in the NHS, people working in the emergency services, it's not that easy. But yeah, having a 2-day election. That could work. I mean, India has a 1-month election. David Welsh says, in Germany, the Bundesrat, the second chamber, is made up of state delegations rather than elected reps. They have a veto on certain issues that touch their responsibilities, but not things like defence. Yeah. And this is what we need to be doing. Taking the best practice from other countries and going, okay, that works. We're not
trying to invent the wheel here.
No. Chatty Rat saying elections on Sunday in Northern Ireland would be great because the DUP and the TUV would boycott them. That would be good. David Welsh is saying postal votes. And yeah, we're out of time, but we need to be talking about, like, okay, can we get rid of voter ID as a requirement? We haven't even mentioned that. We have to undo some of the stuff that the Tories have done.
Undoing all their right suppression is going to be a huge task for Labour moving forward. They need to hit the ground running on that.
16, 17-year-old votes. I have the feeling that you might be for that. I know you are, because I just watched a TikTok video about it, which you made a really good point, which I hadn't thought about, is because the elections are only over 5 years. Most people, like, if they're 18, they might not vote till they're 20, 21.
Yeah, none of
I
us
just went
wake
to.
up on our 18th birthday and then vote immediately. We're all having to wait for a
I
chance to
I
vote
I
afterward.
I almost did that in '97. So I turned 18 in '97. So first
Nice.
election I voted in, and
Uh,
then I left the country to go traveling, and you let the bloody Tories in. I'm like, come on, guys, what are you doing?
yeah, sorry, I was about 10.
You whippersnappers. It's not fair. Admiral Pegasus says, for those public services like the police and NHS and fire, a small election team could go around with a box for the staff to vote while working. We could even talk about voting online. You know, you could do your banking online as long as it's secure, as long as it's, it can't be hacked into by the Russians, then yeah, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that. If work were fairly portioned out, less hours for all, jobs for those without, and everyone happy with good wages, that would be good. 20 and a half is the average voting age in the UK. That's from the Great British Video Gamer, which goes with what you were saying, Femi. Adrian saying elections should be on from a Friday evening to a bank holiday Monday, giving everyone the opportunity. No problems with shopping on a Sunday in Portugal. And Chatty Rat says you can be asked for photo ID in Ireland. List includes employee ID, student ID, welfare services card, and more. Yeah, but don't they have ID in the Republic of Ireland? Don't they have ID cards there?
Yeah, the worst thing about the whole voter ID requirement is the fact that the same Tories who voted against having ID cards for everybody in the UK said that in order to vote, you have to have ID. So they literally chose not to make it so that everybody had ID, and then made having ID a requirement to vote.
It's almost as though they're not on our side, Femi.
Almost.
But we're gonna have to wrap it up there because we've got a little bit over time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How we fixed Britain.
Absolute pleasure.
I did the first episode last week and I just made this huge list of all the things that need to be done to fix Britain. And over the next year, we're gonna be making these shows and talking with people like Femi and with you watching this and people giving contributions in the chat. Next week, we're going to be talking about food security and farming with Liz Webster, who is the head of, say, British Farming. That should be quite eye-opening. Do you remember the Led by Donkeys field where it said Britain now wants to remain? And they wrote it into the field, Led by Donkeys stunt. That was Liz's field.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So join us for that. That'll be next Sunday at 8:00. And those of you who are patrons and members can join me now later. After this, immediately after this. I might make myself another cup of coffee, but on the old Discord server. So if you want to join me on that, and we can continue the conversation. But until next time, I'll be back in the morning at 9:30 for Morning Brew. Big thanks to my guest, Femi Oluwole, and big thanks to everyone for watching. Thanks so much for the super chats. That was absolutely incredible, especially Ivan and Johnny. Wow. And give us a like on the way out. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.